Thank you everyone for who has already joined us. We'll just give it half a minute more for our attendees to connect and be able to see my screen. And we'll begin shortly. Thanks. All right. Greetings to everyone and welcome to our webinar on carbon market simulation, leveraging markets for emission reductions in India. I am Ashwini Hingne. I am a manager with the climate program at World Resources Institute India. WRI India is pleased to launch this webinar. Just a few quick instructions before we begin. All attendees will remain in listen-only mode. However, please use the questions pane on the panel to your right to pose questions and comments during the webinar. These questions can also be addressed to specific presenters and panelists. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all registered participants. If you are having trouble with audio or video, please send a message to me. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has reinforced that our health, economy, and environment are all connected. As the world emerges to a new normal, it has become even more critical that we cut down emissions. Market-based instruments have an important role in achieving this. In the next 1 hour, we will introduce you to carbon markets and their potential and share a brief overview of the carbon market simulation project initiated by WRI India with leading Indian businesses. We also have an exceptional panel of speakers, as you can see here. We will first hear from Mr. Saurabh Kumar from EESL on carbon finance for climate resilient infrastructure. We will then hear from Dr. Shaun Ray from ICRIER on her research and insights on MSMEs, emissions, and carbon markets. Finally, we will hear from business leaders from across sectors of cement, information technology, and engineering on their perspectives for a low carbon Indian industry growth, as well as the potential role that carbon markets can play in achieving that. Accordingly, we have with us Mr. Bodhankar from Ultratech Cement, Mr. Shirsagar from Thermax, and Mr. Dinny from Wipro. We will also keep some time for speakers to answer the questions you all share in the questions pane. All questions we are able to answer here, as well as any unanswered questions during the webinar, will be answered and shared with all participants post this broadcast. So welcome again, and without much ado, I would like to call upon Megha Nath from WRI India to share with you a brief overview of carbon markets and WRI's carbon market simulation. Over to you, Megha.
Thanks, Ashwini. Good afternoon, everybody. During the Paris Agreement, 106 countries endorsed the target to limit a rise in average global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. This limit creates a global carbon budget. As you can see on the screen, the first graph in the red shows the emissions projected for 2030 as per the current trajectories. In contrast, the emissions consistent with 1.5 degrees Celsius targets are nearly half where we would be without any structural changes. Similarly, the second graph shows the difference in trajectories between a business as usual situation and existing commitments from countries. In this gap, to close the gap, countries will need to keep enhancing their ambitions every few years, as they are doing for COP26, now scheduled for 2021. Carbon markets are a policy instrument to price carbon and reduce emissions, and are increasingly regarded as one of the most effective tools to meet global targets. Could we go to the next slide, please? In spite of not having an explicit carbon market, India's experience in market mechanisms have been rich. Clean development mechanisms under the Kyoto Protocol helped mobilize 1.3 trillion rupees for clean energy and energy efficiency projects in the first phase. Subsequently, with ambitious nationally determined targets, India has also adopted a host of measures, including market-based mechanisms like PAT and REC to boost energy efficiency and renewable energy respectively. The second cycle of PAT scheme, which took place between 2016-17 to 2018-19 that ended last year, alone has led to a reduction amounting to 13.6 million tons of oil equivalent, which is equivalent to 61.9 million tons of CO2. More recently, India has signed up to and is now a member of World Bank's Partnership for Market Readiness, under which we have agreed to, which has agreed to grant $8 million to explore market-based instruments in the waste and the MSME sectors, along with developing a meta registry. Next slide, please. To explain you a carbon market in simplified terms, it is essentially a mechanism wherein the total quantity of emissions emitted within the defined scope of market is capped at a fixed quantity lower than the current or the expected emissions. The scope of the market is decided based on the several parameters such as geography, sectors, time frame, GHG gases, etc. These total emissions are then divided amongst the participating companies either for free or via an auction in the form of allowances, where one allowance is equal to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. The allowances held by a company is the maximum amount of emissions it is allowed to emit in that time period. At the end of that period, every company must submit allowances equivalent to their actual emissions. Some companies' emissions will overshoot and some will fall short of the allowances they hold, creating a marketplace with a demand and a supply for these surplus or deficits of allowances that can be traded amongst each other. This demand and supply gives a price signal to the carbon and allows the abatement to occur where it is cheapest in the market. Can we go to the next slide, please? To think of it, why do carbon markets work? By creating a marketplace for limited emissions, the market incentivizes least cost emission reductions, thus leading to the most economically efficient reductions for the society. It also provides a long-term price signal for emissions, motivating industries to innovate over time and move away from emission-intensive technologies and investments. The result of such a shift to a low carbon pathway provides a host of co-benefits, starting with resources and energy efficiency for companies, leading to cost reductions, the availability of new innovative technology, and the creation of new jobs in the economy, as well as improved health and reduced air pollution for all citizens. Next slide, please. Of course, there are potential challenges that carbon markets may face, such as the high costs of implementation due to data collection and administrative cost. It also runs the risk of double counting of emission reductions. It may lead to carbon leakage due to fear of competitiveness impacts, and the markets need to motivate and ensure compliance and security. However, most of these challenges can be mitigated at this design stage by incorporating adequate policy and implementation measures. A study was conducted by the OECD in 2018 on the joint impact of European Union emission trading systems on carbon emissions and economic performance. And the results showed that there was no significant difference in revenue, employees, fixed assets, and earnings before interest and taxes between the control group consisting of non-EU ETS companies and treatment group consisting of the EU ETS companies. Next slide, please. So, as a part of the WRI India's ongoing efforts to address climate change while ensuring economic prosperity and sustainable development, WRI India is facilitating a carbon market simulation across large companies in India. Through this simulation, we aim to build readiness amongst Indian businesses towards a potential carbon market. Secondly, build capacity among MSMEs on emission monitoring and management. Thirdly, provide design and implementation recommendation based on learnings from the simulation and industry feedback. Next slide, please. Accordingly, the outcomes we hope to achieve at the end of this exercise include capacity building for Indian industry sector, especially the MSME, as well as a brief paper suggesting design and implementation recommendations for the context. Ashwini, next please. In terms of activities, we began this project in 2017-18 with desk research on existing emerging international market-based mechanisms and suggested design consideration for India, summarized in our publication mentioned here. To build this, we also worked along 10 anchor companies. We are now in phase 2, where we want to simulate a carbon market based on the learnings from the international markets and these leading companies. With the participating companies, some of who have joined us today, we are all now preparing the baseline scenario based on their publicly disclosed Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions, energy consumption, production, and initiatives towards carbon reduction. WRI will further use the voluntary publicly disclosed targets of the companies to simulate a marketplace. Companies will then be allotted allowances based on their notional targets under the simulation. The simulation will have 3 trading cycles each quarter with final reconciliation at the end of the year, that would be in December 2020. Please note that this voluntary research exercise does not involve any financial obligation for any of the participating companies. Along with the trading, this exercise would also simulate a platform, of course, and simultaneously focus on building capacity through workshops with MSMEs and suppliers to the industry in their supply chain to strengthen the emission monitoring and management. The MSME won't be part of the trading cycles or the exercise for the trading. Could we go to the last slide, please? So this market simulation is primarily aimed at the Indian industry to not only build readiness for a potential carbon market, but internally put their MRV systems in place, meet their own internal targets more efficiently, and explore opportunities and risks, thus preparing for a low carbon future growth. This platform will also help in sharing knowledge, experience, and expertise with peers across sectors in India. Overall, this exercise can also help companies give bottom-up feedback on the design, on the potential market-based mechanism, and strengthen company supply chain by building capacity along the suppliers and the MSMEs in their supply chain. Thank you. Over to you, Ashwini.
Thank you so much, Megha. If you all have any questions pertaining to the presentation so far, please type in your questions and we will come back to you in the Q&A round. We now move on to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Saurabh Kumar. Mr. Kumar is the Managing Director at Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which is a joint venture of public sector undertakings under the Ministry of Power of Government of India. Under Mr. Kumar's leadership, EESL has implemented the Unnat Jyoti by Affordable LEDs for All, which is the Ujala program, and the Street Light National Program. He and his team have also successfully implemented several demand-side measures, including municipal functions, agriculture, public buildings, etc., as well as decentralized solar power plants. Prior to joining EESL, Mr. Kumar has worked in various capacities in Government of India and in the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, where he led the implementation of world's largest clean development mechanism for efficient lighting project. We are delighted to hear from you, Mr. Kumar. Over to you now. Mr. Kumar, you can start your presentation.
You'll have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Oh, I think Mr. Kumar is unmuted. Can you try speaking up, Mansilia? Or just... Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry,
Go.
sorry about
Thanks.
that. So
No worries.
let me first thank WRI for giving us this opportunity to discuss a very important subject of carbon finance and how can we rebuild rural India is what I would like to focus on. And largely, if you see the theme of the government as well, being Atmanirbhar Bharat, and looking at, in particular, trying to strengthen rural infrastructure. And I think the carbon finance can play a very, very important role in this, and that's what I'll talk about in the next 5 minutes. So can we have the next slide, please? So while the slide turns, let me mention that carbon finance in lighting, and that's where I'll begin with first, is not new to India. And way back about a decade ago, in order to promote the replacement of incandescent bulbs with CFLs, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency developed a carbon finance program. At that point in time, it was the largest carbon finance program, which was created in a manner that it is a PPP model, where the government became the enabler, created what was called the program of activities, and sought the investments from private sector players to do this distribution and recovery of old bulbs. This program continued till about 2012. Nearly 30 million CFLs were distributed. We got investments in the country of nearly 500 crores. And of course, as the Kyoto Protocol ended, this program also did not move ahead. So let me very quickly mention that there are a few, at least 2 or 3 similar program of activities that the government of India has approved, particularly for rural areas, for lighting. There are a couple of program of activities for renewable energy projects, which are, and I'll talk about it, how we can leverage more to strengthen rural infrastructure. Next slide, please. Yeah, while the slide is getting loaded, essentially, and you can move to the next slide, please. This is the Ujala program that was initiated in 2015 by the Honorable Prime Minister. We've done about 362 million bulbs till now. Nearly 11 million street lights in the country have been replaced, and it has become one of the largest programs in lighting anywhere in the world. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we did an analysis of this program, and I'll spend a couple of minutes as to why we need carbon finance to push rural infrastructure. If you see, we did 362 million LED lamp distribution. 80% of these bulbs went to urban areas. It's not that we didn't try to get into rural areas, but simply the penetration of rural areas was very, very low. Reason, of course, 70 rupee is a high cost. And if you see the table below, there were certain states who subsidized this bulb. For example, Odisha took bulbs from us and distributed to rural households free of cost. There's a 98% penetration, 5.2 crore bulbs were distributed. Look at Pondicherry and Andhra Pradesh, where the bulbs were priced at 10 rupees each. The rural penetration is more than 90%. Same thing in J&K. 74%. If you recollect, in 2018, the government came out with a Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, as it is called, targeting certain identified villages which were down in the socio-economic ladder. The price of bulb was reduced to 50. We have 45% penetration. So what I'm trying to say is that penetration in rural households of efficient lighting, and that holds true for any other efficient equipment, is directly proportional to the cost of bulb. The lower the cost, the higher is the penetration. Next, please. Now, the question that that WRI team and Megha was presenting just before me is to create a market within India. But is there a market outside? Yes, there is a market outside, and this is the graph which indicates that there were times in 2010-11 where the CER prices were as high as $25 per ton. Even today, if you look at the European markets, the prices are somewhere around 20 to 30 euros per ton. Korea has a domestic trading scheme, and it's called KETS. They also allow offsets from other markets. The price trading is at 20 to 36 US dollars. There are many voluntary markets, largely because the Paris Agreement is yet to come in force. The Kyoto Agreement has died, and therefore a large number of voluntary markets exist, and the rate of the carbon prices are somewhere between $1 and $10 per ton of CO2. Next one, please. So here, another important point that I would like to make: while there is no international norm or international cap on carbon as of now, hopefully we will have something by the end of the year under the Paris Agreement. But look at the host of countries that already have what is called the carbon tax. Sweden has a carbon tax, Switzerland has one, so on and so forth. What this graph depicts is the country and what is the compliance cost for a consumer or an entity, let's say in Sweden, to meet the obligations under the national regulation. Sweden is as high as $125 per ton of carbon. The abatement costs are very, very high. And that is why you have not just these voluntary carbon markets, you also have national carbon markets which buy carbon assets from outside. And there are traders who do this all this while, because there are many entities who are obligated by national laws to reduce their carbon footprint, and many of them find offsets to be a more economical way than to invest on their own. As you see on the left hand side, the carbon market has nearly doubled from 2016 till about 18, which is a good sign, and hopefully post 2020 this would only rise. Next slide, please. So what can we do in this? Of course, if you talk about ESL, my cost of taking the bulb to a rural areas is much more than 70 rupees. It's a non-economic activity as far as I'm concerned. But I can still provide LEDs to rural households at about 10 rupees or 15 rupees. What we can also do is to collect old bulbs, destroy them so that they don't get into the market again. And as I said, there is a program of activity that exists. From the investor point of view, if you look at the Indian power sector, agriculture consumes about 20% of energy. The cost of production or taking that power to rural areas for distribution companies is about 6 to 7 rupees per unit. What we are doing in Maharashtra is to have decentralized solar at the government unused lands, and we are giving power at 3 rupees. We can include carbon finance and a host of other services, which is reflected in the next part. For example, Gram Panchayat street lighting. Most of the villages have no street lighting infrastructure. With the help of the additional revenues that I can generate from carbon markets, I can actually put together brightly lit Gram Panchayats and villages. And there may be a host of other things that I can add. For example, I can add a battery storage solution, which can help clean energy to be used by rural households during the day. We can provide through carbon finance induction cook stoves that will make sure that the use of biomass in cooking goes down, or wood for cooking makes much more difference as far as the human health is concerned. Next slide, please, which I think is the last slide. So what I wanted to say that yes, while there are some issues within policymakers as to on the accounting of carbon credits, but if you look at what the Ministry of Power released about 2 weeks ago, the impact of the program that the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, EESL, has done, and it also indicated that as far as the Paris Agreement is concerned, we are already down to 20% of the, we had committed as the previous speaker mentioned in the Paris Agreement that India will reduce its carbon intensity or energy intensity by 33% by 2022 from 2005 level. We already are at 20% as per that report. Now it is in this era where foreign investment, for the investment coming to various sectors would be far and few. It is extremely important for government, the Ministry of Environment, to understand and realize that there is a vast potential to utilize carbon assets. By utilizing carbon assets, you are making sure that you are creating a sustainable, climate resilient infrastructure. And that's why we have gone ahead and started our programs for rebooting Ujala 2.0 towards rural areas, trying to enhance rural infrastructure by using carbon finance. So let me stop here, and I would like to thank once again WRI for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar, and that was a very interesting take on how not only individual sectors but India as a whole can finance its development in a more resilient manner using some of these mechanisms. Once again, for our audience, if you all have questions for Mr. Kumar, please add them in the questions panel. We now move on to Dr. Shaun Ray, who is Senior Fellow at ICRIER. Dr. Ray is an economist specializing in industry and international trade issues, and her interests include global value chains, technology upgradation of Indian industries, free trade agreements, technology transfer, energy and climate change issues. She has published widely on these issues. She's also edited a book on low carbon pathways for growth in India, which discusses how India can grow in a sustainable and low carbon way. Dr. Ray will now share with us her insights on energy efficiency and emission reductions in MSMEs and the potential carbon market options. So over to you, Dr. Ray. I think you can speak.
Yeah. Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you to WRI for giving me this opportunity to present my views. I'll be talking about MSMEs, emissions and carbon markets. Next, please. Taking the cue from the previous speaker, we know that India has actually in its Paris Declaration said that it would reduce its carbon intensity by by 33 to 35%, and we are on paths to attain that goal, of which the industrial sector has a share of 58% in total energy consumption, and the MSMEs contribute about 13% of global annual final energy consumption. And as of for MSMEs in the context of India, that is about 1/3 of all the emissions that is coming out of the industrial sector. MSMEs contribute about 8% of India's GDP and about 45% of overall industrial output. Next, please. So the framework for doing this is basically, I'll be looking at what are the energy efficiency policies in SMEs, what are the practices, how energy saving has been achieved in the industry, what are the carbon footprint labelings that labeling options for them, whether energy audits are being conducted, and financing options for low carbon projects. Next, please. So on the left panel, you can see the policies that are specific to the MSMEs in India. Most importantly, what we have is the ZED certification scheme, the zero defect, zero effect scheme. And then there is the credit linked capital subsidy technology upgradation scheme. Apart from that, there are 2-3 other schemes, the PRSF, the VCFEE, and of course, the lean manufacturing competitiveness. The focus in all of these cases is basically target a cluster of MSMEs and look at how or offer incentives for energy reduction and energy efficiency. On the panel, on the right, you can see that these are the schemes that are there for the industrial sector in general, starting from the NAPCC and PAT, etc., which I'm sure the speakers who will come after me will be talking about. Next, please. So what is the rationale for the energy efficiency practices in MSMEs? On the right, you can see that there are essentially 3 kinds of questions. First is identification of the process in each industry. Then the industry-wide mapping of the best practices, and finally the identification of the low carbon pathways for each. And in the presentation made by WRI, some of these have been laid out also for the, it is the same for the large industrial sector. But for the MSMEs, there are some specific questions that needs to be asked. And these are the questions that are given there on the left. So specifically, what are the energy emissions that are being cut, whether it's the upstream or the downstream supply chain? Who makes the decision? What motivates them? How do they think or they set the priorities? Who influences the decision makers? And what policy tools or programs will influence the decision makers? And how will these programs work? And this is very important, particularly in the case of MSMEs. Next, please. So the map on the right that you can see basically gives you a sense of where the large energy consumers are. So the dots that you can see are red are the highest. And so there is, for example, a cluster of textiles in Gujarat. There's a textile cluster also in Tirupur. The orange dots are the ones which are lower in energy intensity. But so this basically gives you a map of all the SME clusters and their energy intensity coded according to the color, with the red being the most energy intensive. Now, the practices that are there in the system are basically carbon footprint labeling, which has just been started according to some reports. Energy audits are conducted for the SMEs. And but most important of all is how do SMEs actually finance these? And there are a couple of options that are there, the green bonds and the GCF, etc. And IEA in fact has said that India would need about 2 lakh crores on an annual basis to improve energy efficiency. But this includes not only SMEs, MSMEs, but includes all industrial entities. And finally, the status of what is the status of the low carbon technologies for SMEs. Next, please. So if a market is developed for the carbon in the SMEs context, it should basically have 5 of these criteria or the elements, which Megha has also spoken about. It could be a clustered cap and trade kind of an approach, where the coverage would be based on the regions, on the clusters of SMEs. It could have a sectoral allowance and trade, where the coverage would be based on specific industrial sectors. It could be a energy or pollutant mechanism based, which is basically an extension of the PAT scheme for the specific SME sectors. And the objective here is energy conservation. It could also be a goal-induced offset program, where the SMEs become the suppliers of credit, and it would be based on the CDM mechanism. And finally, it could be a development credit, or where the SMEs could get development credits for energy intensity efficiency achieved by them. Next. So where would SMEs actually, how would they do this? And right now, the industry is in a very nascent stage as far as SMEs is concerned. We heard from Megha that for the large industrial outfits, Some of that has been attempted, but as far as SMEs are concerned, it is, I think, it's still in the drawing board stage, and it hasn't gone much beyond what has been envisaged so far. But then the essential point out here is that one needs to deploy renewable energy as far as possible, and this would be the good option for reducing the GHG emissions. A monitoring system is needed basically to record industry-wide fuel consumption data. While this is there for the large entities, for SMEs, the data is scattered because it is basically generated on the basis of surveys conducted on particular clusters, and we don't have a sense of all the SMEs clusters in the country. And basically, this would also help in reducing firstly identifying what the carbon footprint is, and then reducing the carbon footprint. And the targeting could be done is that even within the SME sector, the energy intensive sectors are picked out first to increase, and their energy efficiency is increased. Now, the low carbon pathway will, of course, vary from industry to industry, and I'm sure the speakers who come after me will be talking about their experience. But as far as the total production costs are concerned, energy accounts for about 15 to 50% of the total production costs for SMEs. And so it means that the reduction where it is 50%, there is a huge potential for reduction of production costs too. So finally, due to COVID-19, most SMEs are in a very bad shape. Working capital is a problem, and finance definitely would be a problem. Most of the SMEs are actually self-financed, about 90, 80%, 87% are self-financed, and some of them may actually postpone operations, if not basic operations. So as undertaking any kind of energy efficiency or any kind of low carbon path would actually maybe postponed for much future till this pandemic is over. Thank you for your attention. I will stop here now.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, and thank you so much for also bringing in the perspective of how MSMEs themselves have a huge potential for cost saving by some of the measures that we discuss even with the large companies. We can now move on to our speakers from India's economic engine, which is the industry sector. Before we begin, I just want to say that I am cognizant of the time we have left, and since we also would like to keep some time for question and answers in the end, we can try to keep our next few speakers limited to 5 minutes. To help with that, I will indicate when we have a minute left, and I apologize in advance to our speakers for that. So we can first begin with Mr. Arvind Bodhankar, who is the Joint Executive President and CSO at UltraTech Cement, which is India's largest cement manufacturing company. Mr. Bodhankar is a core HSE and sustainability professional with over 30 years of experience across sectors. He's also very active in sustainability and safety forums and is on the governing councils and advisory boards of various organizations like CII, We Mean Business, WBCSD, some of which you all may be aware of. Mr. Bodhankar, would you like to share with us some of the top 1 or 2 carbon initiatives, low carbon initiatives UltraTech has implemented? And in your perspective as a leading cement company, how can a simulation exercise like the one we are doing help Indian businesses in the perspective of carbon markets? And I apologize in advance for asking you to keep it short, but I will interrupt you probably once when you have a minute left. Over to you now, sir. Thanks.
So thank you, Ashwini. Thank you, Megha, for inviting me to speak. As only 5 minutes have been given, I will straight away jump on to our initiatives. And those who understand cement industry well, cement is perhaps the highest consumed raw material on the earth, and it's only concrete is only the one after water. I mean, in terms of CO2 emissions, cement industry contributes almost 7% to the absolute CO2 pool. And that's why, most of these civil societies and global organizations working on climate change look at cement industry as an offender or a culprit. But let me tell you, I have worked in almost every sector, right from fertilizer, petrochemical, steel, FMCG, automobile, and now landed up in cement. I can tell you cement is the most advanced industry as far as sustainability or climate change is concerned. And they are not only in the climate change, but they are also into biodiversity. They are also into circular economy at much advance. It was cement industry who first had the low carbon technology roadmap way back in 2010, even before the launch of Paris Agreement, and they were there, and that's where we also, based on that only, we have also set the target for CO2 emissions. And as those who are not familiar with the cement industry value chain, I can tell you the 60% of the CO2 emissions come from the calcination process, which is conversion of limestone to a clinker, that is conversion of calcium carbonate to calcium oxide. And these are called as process related emission, and very little control cement industry has on this. This is the most unique feature of cement industry, which is not the case in other industry. 30% comes from the fuel which is used for the calcination process in the kiln, and 10% comes from the power utilized for running the rotary equipments and all. Naturally, our initiatives are also based on this. First, I will talk about the emissions coming out, how we are reducing the emissions coming out from the calcination process. So as I said, there is very little control for us on this. So what we are doing is we are using more and more blended material like fly ash or pond ash, or for that reason the slag from the steel plant. And we are blending that so that we are trying to keep the clinker factor into the cement as low as possible. And lower the clinker factor will have lesser and lesser emissions. So this on the first piece which I talked about. On the fuel piece, instead of using the virgin fuel which is coal or any other petroleum material, we are blending it with the hazardous waste from the various industries, as well as the municipal solid waste or the refuse derived fuel we have, and we are blending it with it. While it doesn't reduce the overall carbon footprint, but it definitely avoids the carbon, because otherwise this municipal solid waste or industrial solid waste or industrial hazardous waste would have been destroyed in the incinerator at the TSDF site. So we are avoiding that and using it into our kilns and utilizing the calorific value. So that's the way we are reducing the CO2 footprint coming out from the fuel side. On the power, definitely there is a good opportunity. While 10% the portion, the footprint is only 10% of coming due to the power. But what we are doing is we are replacing our power with the renewable energy. And we also have waste heat recovery projects. So waste heat coming out from the cement kilns, the other areas is utilized for generation of the power. So these are the three major initiatives what we have taken, and Ultratech is the leader in this. Our heat value per ton of clinker is best in the industry, and we are definitely a leader in the market as far as CO2 emission reduction or CO2 emission reduction in the clinker production is concerned.
You have 1 minute. Sorry. Please go
Ashwini?
on. You have 1 minute. Yeah, I said you just have 1 more minute. You can probably
we had taken a target of 25%, and this is in line with the low carbon technology roadmap. So in the 15 years, so we have taken a baseline of 2006, and by 2022 we will be reducing the carbon footprint by 25%. So far we are around somewhere 19%, and we are more or less on track as far as CO2 emissions is concerned. Now coming to the carbon market simulation, where we have participated, and as Megha has explained, initially we were also hesitant in joining this particular initiative. But what has happened is, once we understood from Ashwini and Megha what this is, and we thought there is definitely a value in it. First of all, we can prepare ourselves for any future carbon market coming up, or carbon tax coming up, or emission trading schemes coming up. And we know there are almost 75 countries already have implemented carbon trading schemes. And as Mr. Saurabh Kumar has said, today or tomorrow, it will be a reality in India also. So this is helping us in preparing for that. At the same time, here is an opportunity to align our targets to whatever targets we would require to have in order to avoid any net cash outflow for buying some allowances or something like that. So this is helping us in mitigating that, compensating that cash outflow, as well as the regulatory risk which will be coming out because of this regime which is likely to come. And this will also provide a policy feedback on the feedback to the policy makers that once you implement this simulation once you simulate this carbon market for India and we participate, whatever the learnings are there, that can be communicated to the policy makers, and right from the beginning, you can have the right policy regime in place. So these are some of the advantages we have seen in this particular simulation, and that's why we have decided to go ahead and participate into it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bodhankar, and I think you have kept time pretty well as well. We will come back to you with any questions our audience raises, especially for cement. But for now, we'll hear from Mr. A.K. Shirsagar. Mr. Shirsagar heads the HSE and sustainability portfolios at Thermax. He has worked in various functions within the organization and has successfully trained employees on sustainability initiatives to get the wider participation on his key initiatives. Mr. Shirsagar, similar question to you. What are the top 1 or 2 initiatives you have implemented, and what do you plan to take away from the simulation? Once again, 5 minutes for you as well, and please go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, WRI, for giving this opportunity to us. I am coming from Thermax, and most of you know Thermax provided a lot of environment-friendly solutions to the customers and efficient energy deployment and also water resources. We also provide chemicals for the process industry. Coming to directly the question from Ashwini is basically engineering industry is not coming under a very high carbon emitting companies, but still the way we provide solutions to others, we also thought of actually implementing the accounting practices, and we involved WRI in this journey and did the capacity building of the key people among our various locations of the organization. And after that, very detailed calculations were done, and then we found out the top emitting areas, especially scope 2, the electricity. And then initiatives were taken to improve the efficiencies as well as to replace the high efficiency solutions so that the energy consumption is down and emissions are reduced substantially. Also, the next step was to look at the scope 1 emissions, and we use our own products like boilers and chillers. So where we have moved from the high carbon intensive fuels to low carbon intensive fuels, like changing from furnace oil to biomass, changing from HSD to natural gas. Then there was a lot of identified areas in terms of wastages by the utility teams, and they have worked on that and reduced. The third step was to go for the solar rooftops of starting from our major plants. We have already done for 2 to 3 plants, and we are moving ahead. So it's going for renewable. We have our own division who does this solar rooftop. So taking help of them, we are doing. And then we found out some high energy consuming equipments at locations based on our actual data. And then there was automation suggested, and implementations were done in some short blasting areas, in some welding machine areas, and that has given us good reduction. So last 3 years of experiences, there is quite a good amount of reduction that we are achieved it. And then we are looking at some of the for the next future actions, we are looking at some of the things like science-based targets or carbon pricing, internal carbon pricing, to look at it very effectively. Since we were associated with WRI, when WRI suggested us to be part of this, we understood that since the CDM, few years back, we were part of CDM and helped many customers. We thought, why not we ourselves join this program and understand the actual simulation process, the market dynamics, and actually how market dynamics works in helping reducing the overall carbon emission. One part is that it will help the country as the whole market will work for effectively reduction of the carbon emissions. Internally, it will be very good for us because it will push us again to look at some of the high emitting processes which are in chemical or other businesses, and then try and reduce them. And thirdly, also, to understand the market dynamics, how it really works, and whether the future carbon market is possible or not. So we thought all these 3-4 things will really give us a lot of insights into it. So thank you again, WRI, for giving this opportunity to us and presenting our case and also part of this simulation market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shirsagar. We now move on to Mr. Dinny from Wipro. Mr. Lingras Dinny heads the Sustainability Initiatives Program team at Wipro. He has a strong hold on various ecological, social, education, and community programs. He also works on various advocacy areas with the industry and government. And one of his functions is to also anchor disclosures across global frameworks like GRI, CDP, DJSI, and many more. Mr. Dinny, again, same with you. If you can share some of your initiatives, and specifically from the IT sector or the service sector, what is it that you think is the role that the sector can play in domestic or global carbon markets? So at this point.
You're able to hear me now? Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks. So I'll keep it. I'll try to keep it brief. So all of you might know Wipro is one of the large IT service companies, and I'll just give a very quick landscape of the energy footprint that we have across different value chain that we have, and also explain briefly what we have done so far and what we plan to do going forward. So one is that so we have around 180,000 employees spread across the globe, bulk of them based in India, and so our business is largely in terms of looking at IT consulting services for global clients. So one is the footprint is basically comprised of the buildings where we operate out of, because essentially since services need building spaces, so we have a large building footprint in India. Close to 120,000 employees working on various metros in India, and a good part of employees also travel to overseas client spaces. So if you look at the overall footprint of Wipro or any large IT company based in India, the footprint will largely be 1/4 of footprint will be on building emissions, which is basically in terms of energy consumption and other key infrastructure related emissions. And 3/4 of that would be in aspects like business travel and employee commute, right? Because a lot of the employees, a lot of the consultants travel to various customer sites in India or overseas for businesses, right? So that's the broad kind of a footprint that we have. 1/4 is in building services and 3/4 is in business travel, employee commute, product services that we procure, and so on and so forth. So scope 1 and 2 is just 1/4 of our emissions, right? I think we have built a robust portfolio of green buildings over the last decade and a half. One of the first few companies to start the green building movement in India. We have close to have about 15 buildings which are green, which are LEED certified, either silver or gold certified buildings in India. That was pre-2010, 2006, 2007, that time frame. So that is one thing. And post that, so in a sense, while the sector as such is not addressed by any PAT scheme, but the fact that buildings obviously use lot of the primary materials like cement or steel indirectly has an impact on us, right? how do we decide to choose materials for building has an indirect impact in terms of our footprint as well, right? So that is one thing. And if you look at globally also, what we see is globally 1/3 of the energy demand is going in buildings, right? And more than a quarter of emissions actually go to buildings. So the buildings have a huge footprint. In India, it might be so much high right now, but I think over the next few years, while a lot of the unbuilt urban spaces, rural spaces kind of ramps up, our building footprint of emissions will increase going forward. So I think we need to look at how to enable the green building movement in India. And I think schemes like the carbon trading mechanism can help in that area as well. So what we have done is that one is on the ensuring that we do the right design of buildings through various measures. Second is procurement of renewable energy for our operations. So close to 40% of the energy procurement for our buildings in India is from renewable energy sources. That's a significant step that we have taken. The third is that to guide our way forward, we have signed up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, SBTi based targets in 2017. So right now we have a target which basically says that we'll reduce our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% by 2030 from a 2018 baseline. Similarly, for employee commute, business travel and waste management, which is 70% of the bulk of the emissions, we're going to reduce by 30% absolute emissions. So that's a steep target, right? And so while I think we've done a lot of work on the building side, efficiency side, like efficient air conditioning equipment, renewable energy procurement, solar power for our buildings, stuff like that. But the challenge that we have going forward is to reduce our scope 3 footprint. And the attention is coming back right now to that area, especially in the COVID or the post-COVID world. A lot of work that we're doing right now, including this webinar, is basically using remote conferencing technologies, stuff like that. And I think while we had made a beginning on that front in the last few years, I think we are seeing an increased ramp up of using these technologies. For example, we used to have 80% of employees coming to our offices just in the beginning of March. But as we speak right now, it is completely flipped. Bulk of the employees work remotely. So we had to rapidly deploy remote working technologies. We had to deploy laptops for all our employees working remotely. And including that, one of the challenges that we have is because we handle customer data, sensitive customer data, how do we actually set up the data security protocols and infrastructure to enable remote working and also gain confidence of clients? So that is one challenge that we have faced. How do we ramp up the remote conferencing working rapidly at a scale which is unprecedented even for a company like us? The second is that we are also trying to look at a lot of the technologies right now are not, the IT infrastructure is not actually in the offices. We are looking at shifting a significant part of our infrastructure to the cloud. So if you look at whether it's the mail servers or the computing devices, everything we are using the cloud computing equipment. Right? That is one thing where you virtualize your entire IT infrastructure. You don't have any specific servers in your campus, but actually using virtualized cloud computing services for your business services. So that is one thing. The other point is that pre-COVID also we had a lot of significant work in terms of reducing our business travel footprint.
Just 30 seconds more. We are already above 5 minutes. I'm just interrupting you.
Sure. I just want to quickly say that business travel, what we've done is we also try to look at our footprint, our airline emissions footprint, right, and how we try to reduce that. We're looking at choosing airlines based on their emissions portfolio. Also, we significantly ramped up our carpooling and electric vehicles program in India, right? So close to 50,000 employees in India use actually carpooling services that we have through our partners, and including electric vehicles. So I'll just conclude by saying that there is a huge leverage that we have by using IT for two things. One is to look at engaging with our suppliers in terms of the life cycle of building, whether it is procurement of materials and also in-use phase emissions, whether it is HVAC and IT infra, where we actually procure from a lot of MSMEs. How do we actually leverage that carbon trading mechanism to make the right choices of purchase choices, right? That is one point. And secondly, also to look at certain interventions like in transportation, logistics, supply chain, and energy water management. There is immense scope for using IT as a tool to reduce the overall value chain footprint. Right. So I'll stop there and is there any question that I can take?
Thank you so much. Thank you. I will just quickly head on to take a very few questions. We are almost at time, but I also want to assure our other participants who posted questions that if we are unable to answer your question here, we will still share the answer with you later. So to begin with the first question, we can go with Mr. Kumar. So the first question that we have here for you is that EESL has very ambitious programs for energy efficient pump sets for agriculture. Unlike efficient lighting sector, this sector does not participate in carbon markets so far. Do you have any insights on how this sector could benefit from carbon markets? So that's for energy efficient pump sets.
Okay, so the carbon-based program that we are creating is a slightly different program. I mean, where what we are trying to do is to make the rural substation, which is energizing the pump sets, completely on renewable energy. Now, adding the carbon piece, we want to put in battery systems to store energy. And third, of course, go to the demand side and use a bit of a carbon asset liquidation to switch over to energy efficient pumps. So this will create a overall value chain of sustainability in the agriculture sector. And remember, the agriculture sector consumes close to 20% of India's energy. And more importantly, the amount of subsidy burden that it casts on the state governments is about 90,000 crores. So it's an enormous amount of financial and also clean energy initiative that which we are already taking.
Thank you so much. So for the next question, I'll ask Dr. Ray to answer. It says, with recent economic stimulus package given to MSMEs, what do you foresee in terms of subsidies to MSME for green measures? Do you think they will continue or they won't?
Yeah, so can you see me?
Yes, I can see you and hear you.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Yeah, so there's hardly been any mention of green measures in the Atmanirbhar document that has been Atmanirbhar Bharat document that has been put out. See, the issue for MSMEs, and there were a couple of questions on this, other questions also, that first they have to survive. Once, and which means survive the lockdown and the the upheaval created by the pandemic. Once they are in a situation when they have tided over all of this, energy efficiency, green issues, all that, they will come back then. I think till then, all of this will take a backseat.
Thanks. So for the next question, may I ask Mr. Bodhankar to answer, because it asks, what changes do you think Indian cement sector will have to make to align their targets to climate science?
Yeah, so science-based initiative is there, and most of the cement companies are, committing to science-based target. We are also thinking to commit for the science-based target. We haven't done that so far, but as I told you, the low carbon technology roadmap, which was developed way back in India as well as globally with the International Energy Agency, we are compliant to that, and we'll very soon, be thinking of joining the science-based call of action also.
Thanks, Mr. Bodhankar. The next question is for Mr. Dinny. So SPCBs, that is State Pollution Control Boards, have started issuing letters to DG set owners for retrofit solutions. How do you plan to comply with this?
So one is that across some of the large campuses, we set up the air quality monitoring stations, and we do continuous measurement of air quality, ambient air quality in the building as well as outside the building. I think we keep monitoring the stack emissions and ensure that they're within the parameters. But specific measures that we have taken, I'll have to check with my colleagues and come back. What exactly the thing? But obviously we measure it on a periodic basis as per the CPCB norms or SPCB norms.
Sure. Let me see. We can just take one more question. This is for Megha. So do you have any preliminary reports that have been published for the carbon market simulation? Megha, do
Sorry.
you want to answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we do have, in fact, in our phase 1, we have done a study for seeing all the international markets, how the markets have functioned, and then we have come up with a study consideration for the Indian context. And so far, as we had done before, we got in touch with most of the companies. We within ourselves have done an internal baselining report to understand what are the current emissions, what are the historic emissions. So we do have that, and the publication I have sent on the chat box also to everybody.
Sure. So I think another thing I would like to mention is that this presentation will also be shared with participants, and the presentation also has a link to our publication from phase 1, which is publicly available for everyone. So you can also refer to that. I think we're quite well over time, and so I will stop here for now. I would like to take the opportunity to once again thank all of our speakers for joining us today, for sharing their insights, and it was amazing to hear insights from across different sectors and stakeholder perspectives. I think this is what is essentially needed for any successful policy or a successful scheme, be it carbon markets or anything else, which is basically collaboration across different actors within the Indian economy as well as society. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our audience members for listening to us, for sharing your questions, and we will definitely get back to you all with the answers. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and with that I would like to close this session. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ashwini.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Ashwini,
Megha.
and thank you, Megha.
Thank you. Have a good day.